So the upcoming May season of Marvel Snap cards has been officially revealed. We're going to talk about all the new cards, give them scores from 1 to 4 stars, predicting which ones are going to be the best and worst, and talk about some changes since we initially saw these in the first data mines when they popped up. So all that said, let's go ahead and kick things off here with the season pass card. It's Esme Cuckoo, who I think remains unchanged since we first saw her. So she is a 3/4 with on reveal, copy a card from your deck into your hand, and then set its cost to 3 and power to 4. Notably, those are fixed values. It's not like, you know, it's changing it to her stats. So if you buff her or something, it doesn't suddenly become 6 power instead of 4. It's going to stay at 3/4. But that is still potentially really nice because it can be a discount and it can be a power boost. So for cards like Iron Man is the classic example, right? Iron Man becomes 2 cheaper and 4 stronger, which is insane because that is suddenly a 3/8 Iron Man on its own that, of course, would scale up any additional power in a given location. So if you play this and you hit Iron Man, you are like over the freaking moon. And basically any card that fits into that like Mr. Negative mold is also going to be really good for Esme Cuckoo. So high cost, low power values, both of those are going to be favorable swings for Esme. But, you know, honestly, even sometimes things with similar cost values might still be really nice just to get this power boost. So if you think about like a Silver Surfer package, for instance, Brood, great hit for Esme Cuckoo. Something like a Sage, fantastic hit. You know, you're just happy to get a nice little 4 power boost while maybe playing a 3-drop on board to set up for that Surfer later. I mean, even honestly, a Surfer kind of, you know, makes this look like a 3/6 because you're getting a 2 power boost to Surfer while still establishing some 3-drops. And then you might, you know, occasionally feel kind of sad that you hit Surfer, but really excited when you hit a Brood, or pretty pumped when you hit a Sage, and like maybe this slots in a Surfer. Maybe this is actually something you could run in a Mr. Negative deck. Like, it's not good post Mr. Negative, but it could be kind of a backup plan or a little sideline. Maybe there's some anti-venom synergies here. We have this and anti-venom together, both of which love those like 0 power cards that can either be free with anti-venom or now cheaper and boosted with Esme Cuckoo. And you build a kind of like sideways Mr. Negative deck that's not actually Mr. Negative, but still running a lot of the same stuff. So in essence, what I'm saying is I think this is actually a pretty nice flexible kind of effect that if your deck is built for it, there's going to be a lot of hits in this that feel really good. And then, you know, at the end of the day too, remember, this is just like drawing a card from your deck. Like, yeah, the stats and stuff are going to change, usually for the better when you build towards it, but it's just kind of like finding an extra thing. There's some value and some resource aspects to this as well that are nice, not to mention synergies like Victoria Hand could come into play as well. So essentially, I think there's about 4 or 5 different ways to slice this, where this could fit into really specific packages, could maybe even carve out its own new decks, and might actually just be kind of like a general value card decks could run just to more consistently find the good things in their deck and have these like really occasional high rolls where even if there's only 2 or 3 things in the deck, Esme hitting those might be like instantly game winning. And otherwise, she's just kind of fine to play on 3 and make some stuff, almost like, you know, an Agent Coulson or something in that slot instead. So I actually think Esme Cuckoo looks really, really good. I think this card is both flexible and powerful from a ceiling standpoint. So I think this one's going to get played a lot. Yeah, and speaking of good cards, this next card is Surge. I think the one people are most excited about this month. I agree. I think she actually looks really fun. This is a 2/2. With on reveal, give the top card of your deck -1 cost and +1 power. And then after you play it, repeat this ability. So basically here, you're trying to chain into your top decks, keep playing those top decks so that you get another chain of this ability, netting basically, you know, a cost savings and a power boost every single turn. So you play this on turn 2, you draw your card on 3, you play it, you've now saved 1 energy and gained +1 power, right? You do that again on 4, 5, and 6. That's 4 top decks effectively getting played. That's +4 power in total, making Surge's net output in that case look like 6 power. She's a 2 + 4. That's 6. And then your cost savings are also going to be -4, kind of making Surge look like a -2 cost card for 6 power, which of course is incredibly efficient when you basically use her to save a bunch of energy. So you of course want to make sure you're playing those top decked cards as consistently as possible to maximize the surge chains. I mean, maybe you won't always, maybe you'll have to wait a turn, but I think most decks will be constructed in a way where they have cards that maybe max out at 4 cost, so that when you draw that card on turn 3 after your surge, any card in your deck is always playable because a 4 cost will now become a 3 cost card, which that's not hard for decks to do, to already top out at 4. That's kind of reasonable. A lot of decks want to do that anyway. So Surge could be a very natural fit in a lot of lists like that. So, I think the decks you should consider first and foremost for Surge are those that are running a significant number of cheap cards already and maybe have that low cost ceiling. So things like Agent Venom decks could be a really good fit, right? Most of the cards in that deck are 3 cost or less. I think bounce decks could be really interesting. I'm not actually sure for bounce decks if it's possible to re-trigger this surge ability on the same card. In other words, if you top deck like a Rocket Raccoon and it costs 0 and then you beast it back to hand and then you play it again, does that still count as after you play it? That would make this even more insane because you could kind of like double dip per card. I have a feeling it's probably once per card, and then after you've played it, that kind of eats up the ability to repeat it. But regardless, just from a cost standpoint, bounce could still be really good because, having like 0 cost stuff to play into a bounce deck can really push your efficiency, can maximize the number of cards per turn. All of those things that bounce decks really like to do. That said, I don't think you have to go that cheap. I think you could just run this in a lot of decks as a good tempo 2-drop that just kind of greases the wheels a little bit and makes your life simpler. We see like Zabu in a lot of decks just for that exact same reason. Zabu is kind of free to play on 1, sort of makes your mid game a little smoother sometimes. Surge could live in a very similar space. I will just say, like, a warning is you don't want to have a deck with a lot of conditionally timed plays. In other words, think about like Silver Surfer, for instance, right? Surge and Silver Surfer decks, not a crazy idea. All the cards are probably pretty cheap already, which is good. 3 drops in particular going to 2 could be nice on turn 5. You could put together a 3 and a 2 cost card in a Surfer deck, could open up some nice lines and fill some gaps there. But stuff like Silver Surfer is a card you want to play last. You want to make sure he's the last thing you play. And with Surge, of course, you want to keep playing that top deck to ensure you're chaining this ability. So if you hit Silver Surfer, it's going to break your chain, maybe kind of kill your Surge. The more cards you have like that are conditional or timed, so like a Shang-Chi or something in your deck, you want to play that at a key moment. You don't want to play it on your Surge. So those would be the kind of things that maybe start to exclude Surge. Might still be worth it in a Surfer deck, frankly, if there's only 1 card like that. And maybe I'll take that risk. Maybe I'll play the Surfer early because it's decisions to make. But lists that do that are lists that are going to punish Surge more. So I think low cost decks like we talked about, maybe even some ramp decks could do this because cost discounts can be really valuable in ramp decks in particular. You got big 5s and 6s, playing those out of turn early could be pretty nice. So you got the small stuff, maybe even the big stuff. I think general utility curve kind of tempo decks that are just running a lot of 3s and 4s in general, probably a fine fit for Surge. So again here, another card with a lot of great potential homes, and I think ultimately a very high output sort of card. It may not always hit 4 times in a given game, but I think 2 to 3 times is more than enough to make Surge feel worth it, and that's not going to be a hard ask for a lot of decks to hit consistently. Now, speaking of consistency, that might be a hang-up for this card. We'll talk about it. Prodigy 3/4. This one, again, is unchanged since we saw it data mined. On reveal, if this is in the back row, copy the text of the card in front of it. So we have here another kind of positional based card like Captain Carter and so on. And I think that could contribute some clunkiness here for Prodigy. So basically, if you want to copy, the first card, he needs to be in the 3rd spot. If you want to copy the second card, he needs to be in the 4th spot. So in particular, getting to that 4th spot in a timely manner can be awkward. So for instance, the first thing I thought of is like ongoing decks. They're one of the better examples of having low cost things that are pretty solid to copy. Even the reveal video for this had that example. So, like an Ant-Man into a Goliath. those are both solid options for Prodigy. Like even copying an Ant-Man can be pretty cool. Goliath, often in an ongoing deck, can be a really nice copy starting at 4 and scaling up from there. They aren't like the dreams, but they're solid results. The dreams are the same stuff we talked about with Esme, right? So like an Iron Man, for instance, would be the dream. Have an Iron Man and copy an Iron Man. But that's where the clunkiness comes into play, right? Because if you have Iron Man even in your first spot and you don't want to have to commit 4 cards to a given location, right? You have to play Iron Man like on turn 5. That means your turn 6, you need to play another card after the Iron Man and then play your Prodigy, which means you're really committing to a given location, which might make, you know, like a turn 6 awkward. Well, I can't play Spectrum in this deck right now if I'm playing Prodigy on turn 6. So what am I doing instead? Am I playing like Prodigy and Silver Surfer together? I mean, maybe he is a 3-drop. It's a possibility. But Surfer maybe doesn't have as many good hits for something like Prodigy. You know, I think ongoing cards in general are going to be your best bets. Although I think this will work with on reveals. Like I think if he copies the text of an on reveal card, he will still proc the on reveal. So there still could be some lines there for sure. But I think ongoing cards are going to be your best bet because they usually start at that lower power value and scale up. So, you know, it's just kind of a positioning and timing challenge, which Captain Carter also had as a 4-cost card, right? And they pulled her down to 3, and that really helped. But Carter, you often want to play in the front row, whereas with Prodigy, you want to play, obviously, in the back row, which just pushes that timeline back, which gets into that same kind of Captain Carter awkwardness, I think. You know, maybe there are enough decks that can kind of line up a bunch of cards late and like play Prodigy and 3 1-drops or something. But can that same deck have the high payoff cards like an Iron Man? So it becomes this kind of balance of cost and positioning and timing that, like, of course you can envision scenarios where that works out well. I have a harder time envisioning the deck construction, the context that supports that as easily. And maybe you don't need a home run. Maybe you're fine with Goliath and Ant-Man, and that makes this an okay card for like an ongoing deck. You know, maybe Captain Carter's fine too. Like, okay, if it copies Carter, that's actually pretty cool. We see like, you know, Moonstone and Carter with Carter in the second spot. Could be the same sort of vibe. Moonstone, by the way, another good copy for Prodigy. So I do think this gets a nod in ongoing decks. I think it could probably make the cut. As you start to move out of that exact specific home for it, I do think it gets more and more clunky and more awkward as I try to envision it in a lot of spaces. I mean, honestly, a Mr. Negative deck again is kind of interesting where, you know, you have a bunch of 0-cost negative cards that you're dumping late, and then this comes in to like support one or double down, but it might just be overkill and it might blow up the curve or, you know, reduce the amount of payoff cards. But if you had sort of a hybrid negative deck that was like Esme and Prodigy and a few big negative hits, like maybe there's something there. Otherwise, I just worry a little bit about timing and space and fit. Also, of course, it's just disruption. We have so much stuff right now that can disrupt positioning and placements. A rock comes in, you know, a Scream deck moves your cards all over the place. Prodigy gets really awkward in some of those instances because you may play it and then the card you expected to copy moves out of the way, or a rock comes in and Prodigy copies the wrong thing. It is nice that he's an on reveal, so, you know, if you do have priority and you can kind of consistently hit your thing, he's going to stay fixed as an Iron Man or whatever. It's not like an ongoing card where if Iron Man later moves. So it might be fine in some instances, but there are plenty of other instances where things could get wacky and go weird, not to mention general location variants and stuff screwing with this one too. So I think, again, really high payoff card. You know, copy an Iron Man, you're over the moon, you got 2 Iron Mans, you're winning that location. That's insane. Just has some real challenges to do that reliably and maybe build a deck that satisfies that reliably as well. So kind of in the middle of the road on this card, but I will say I think ongoing is a good fit for it. It's just, will they be willing to cut something that's already in that deck that probably also fits pretty well right now? So moving on to our next card here, this one got some big changes since the initial data mine, and I think has gotten dramatically worse, actually. Elixir is now a 2/3 on reveal. One of your cards destroyed last turn gets revived here. So keep that in mind. This is what Elixir was before. He was a 1/1 with activate. The next time one of your cards is destroyed this turn, revive it here, which I thought this was so much better. Cheaper, obviously. The activate made the timing way more favorable and interesting. Keep in mind, we also had seen another data mined card previously, Kid Omega, that had this activate, destroy the next card you play this turn and gain its power. And I was just going crazy talking about these two cards together. Kid Omega plus Elixir, both of these activates basically play something gigantic, destroy it with Kid Omega, gain that power, and then resummon it with Elixir. That seemed completely broken. So maybe a good thing that they've changed, because that seemed nuts. But now we're getting this Elixir, which I think is way lower power, and we don't actually know where Kid Omega is. Might come in the like bonus season 4 cards at the start of next month. The May bonus cards were already released. That was Topaz, Fanfei, and Leaper. Seems like there are going to be a few season 4 cards introduced at the start of every season, but they seem to be kind of delayed. So next month we might get like Kid Omega stuff to synergize with this month's cards. Just a guess. We don't really know for sure. So anyway, with this Elixir, more expensive, number one, but also this timing, I think, is a lot harder to achieve, because before, you know, with an activate card, you play it down early. That's great because you can just pick your moment, you know, load up that energy spend early on and then bank it for later. With this one, you know, you have to time it, and it's last turn in particular. So, you know, basically the thing you want to destroy has to be done by turn 5. So initially I was thinking like, oh, dude, you could do some really sick stuff with like expensive on reveals. You know, you could play like, you know, White Tiger into Misery and then use Elixir to copy to bring back the White Tiger and get all these like crazy 8/8s flying everywhere, right? And maybe have a Fire Hair in there to synergize with it. But that particular timing is now kind of clunky. So instead, what you might need to do is like play a 3-drop on reveal, and then on turn 4, destroy it with Misery, and then on turn 5, play Elixir to bring back that destroyed on reveal. Also keep in mind, it's only going to resurrect one of the on reveals. So, you know, you might want to have an isolated target as opposed to destroying 3 or 4 things. Might be risky. You might get a low value one or the wrong one or whatever. But it just becomes a lot harder to use. And then I also was thinking like, oh, this could have been a Shang-Chi answer where it's like, oh, my opponent Shang-Chi's my card. I play Elixir to immediately resurrect the Shang-Chi. But with this last turn requirement, everybody wants a Shang-Chi on turn 6 because that's the surprise turn for Shang-Chi. This only works as like a Shang-Chi counter if they Shang-Chi you on, you know, turn 4 or 5 or whatever, which is much less likely to happen. Not impossible, but less likely. So this one just becomes a lot more awkward to work with. And suddenly I have a hard time figuring out like what I'm going to do with this. Like just even concocting an idea for a video. I don't really know what to do. It's probably something with Fire Hair and Misery and trying to chain some like cool on reveals. And, you know, there's obviously some lines there, but nothing is really clean to me right now. It's like, oh, I'll play, I guess, Fire Hair on 2, Ironheart on 3, Misery it, and then bring it back. Like, that's not interesting or big or dramatic or game winning. And then if you think about this in like the context of a regular destroy deck, you know, obviously there's stuff you can Venom or Carnage, some big targets you could maybe resurrect. So use Venom to eat some big stats, and then Elixir to pull it back. I don't think that's crazy. Eat a big Atuma or something and then bring the Atuma back on 6. Maybe your dreams are even bigger than that, right? But it just becomes a challenge from a timing standpoint and a sequencing standpoint. Any cards like this that have sequencing demands always seem to fall a little short because it just, you know, so many variables come into play. What your opponent is doing, locations, what your hand looks like. And sometimes it's just really hard to line this stuff up. So what I think will happen is if you play this in like a destroy deck, sometimes, you know, your Venom is going to eat 3 or 4 things, and it might just eat some random little rock or some, you know, maybe a Deathlock gets eaten or whatever. And then it's like, oh, well, I've got Deathlock in the pool for Elixir. That's no good. That's risky. Like, you know, there's just all these little challenges and problems. And even if you think about like good destroy targets, the Wolverines, the X-23s, the Nimrods, right? Well, the Wolverines and the X-23s, they don't get revived anyway because they don't actually die, right? You can't revive those cards because they're still alive and moved somewhere else on board. So it's like maybe a Nimrod, but how are you destroying a Nimrod on time? Because you play Nimrod on 5, you're destroying it on 6. Elixir's not going to see that because it had to be last turn. So it's just, you know, what's the solve here? What's the line? What's the deck fit to make Elixir good? I'm sure you can come up with a few cool things, and I'm sure I will when this card hits, but ultimately I don't think it's going to feel clean. You know, I think you're going to ideally want to save this till the end of the game to hit the biggest targets. Anytime earlier is going to feel weird. Playing this on turn 4 or 5 or something is going to be awkward. Playing it on turn 3, even after like a Carnage on turn 2, there's just no good time basically to play Elixir when you're trying to do other things. So I think this last turn requirement is going to make Elixir feel really awkward, and it's going to really hold this card back a lot. So moving on to our final card here, we have Xorn, who is a 2/3, and he reads, after any 3 or 4 cost card is played here, move it to another location. So this can do 2 things, right? This can be your own move enabler, kind of a Topaz style card, where you play this down and you play your Vulture on turn 3, you play your Red Wing on turn 3, and this moves it, and you activate an awesome move bonus for Red Wing or Vulture. Are there any good 4-cost cards that care about moving? I don't know. Those are the 2 that come to mind. But limited to 3 or 4-cost cards, so not going to work with your your Human Torch or your Dagger or whatever. So might be kind of a deck construction limitation. On the other side of things, of course, is your opponent has some limitations here, because this also works on their cards, which means 2 things. They might have a hard time playing to Xorn if they're a deck that really relies on 3 drops or 4 drops. If you're playing a Silver Surfer deck, they may just find it impossible to actually get meaningful power in the Xorn location. Maybe Brood saves them, but nothing else could go there, because Xorn keeps shipping it out, at least until things are filled up. So that could be some clunkiness for some decks, kind of a soft counter or tech card of sorts, just lock up a location for free. And then on top of that, of course, is Scream. If you're running a Scream deck, Xorn is another way to potentially shuffle your opponent's cards around. I will say, that's a little unreliable. Maybe if you have priority, sometimes you could kind of make a sneaky play and say, hey, they're going to play their 4-drop here. I'm going to get Xorn down first and move their 4-drop. Like, that can happen. But it might kind of whiff otherwise. You might just play it and they never really play 3s or 4s to Xorn, and some decks will just play 5s or 6s or whatever there. And beat him anyway, because he's ultimately pretty small. So I do feel like the situationality on the Scream side of things, I don't know if that's going to be worth it. That deck has a lot of ways to move and disrupt, and I just don't know if Xorn's reliable there. So I think maybe a move deck that's running 3 drops that want to move in particular might value this a little bit more, particularly with Topaz being a 3-drop herself. She kind of conflicts with Vulture and Red Wing both, whereas this on curve fits under each of those, which might actually be a much better option for those decks. So that said, I still don't really see this card going that wide or being that impactful in either of those archetypes. I still think this one's just kind of iffy as it stands. So I don't know. I think you could almost push the numbers up on this a little bit. I think people are going to find that this just doesn't make as big of an impact as they hope, as often as they'd like. All right, so now let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 4 stars, starting with the best and going to the worst. Surge is a 4-star card. Esme Cuckoo is a 4-star card. Prodigy is a 3-star card. Xorn is a 2-star card. Elixir is a 1-star card. Yeah, it's not really in love with Elixir or Xorn this month. I mean, Elixir could be a 2-star, but I don't see it coming together. That said, Surge and Esme both look really strong to me. So it might be a strong start to the month, because these both come out, I think, the first week. And then it might actually get a little worse as we go. I don't know. Maybe I'll be surprised by Xorn. Maybe it fits better in Scream than I think. That said, I hope Scream decks die. I'm sick of Scream. I'm sick of seeing it. So maybe I'm just hoping it's not good there. And I'm also not in love with Move either. So maybe it's just a personal bias. I just don't see it being that good. That said, I think Esme and Surge are both potentially very meta warping cards. Particularly Surge looks really fun to play and could be very good too. So still some fun stuff this month. That said, share your thoughts on these cards down below. Curious to hear what you think. Cool decks you have planned, all that fun stuff. Thanks again, as always, for watching. And I guess I will see you around.